Good morning, everyone. If you don't already know, my name is Jordan, and welcome to another episode of Trainer Chats, where I sit around and drink coffee and cuddle dogs and answer all your burning questions about dogs and dog training. This video I expect to be a little bit longer than the rest, or at least longer than the previous ones, because we're going to be talking about attention seeking behaviors and problem solving behaviors, how to tell the difference between the two, and how to address some of the most common ones. So down below, what I'll do is put in the video where I start talking about each one of these different behaviors. That way, if you have one that you specifically would like to know about, but maybe not the rest of them, you can skip ahead in the video. Otherwise, feel free to listen to the whole thing because I'm sure, you know, there'll be some helpful info for you in there regardless. So the very first thing that I would like to do is talk about identifying why the behavior is happening that your dog is presenting. Because depending on why the behavior is happening is going to determine how it is that you're going to go about trying to fix it. So, the first thing that I want to do is kind of talk about the difference between an attention seeking behavior and a problem behavior. An attention-seeking behavior is a behavior that the dog would not do if you were not there, and they are doing it strictly to try to get you to be reactive to them in one way or another, whether it's positive or negative. You have to remember that with dogs, when they're doing attention-seeking behaviors, they are only doing it to elicit a response. They don't care if you yell, they don't care if you praise them, they don't care about that. They want your attention, hence the name attention-seeking behavior. And these come in all shapes and sizes, whether it be frustration barking, jumping on you, pawing at your leg, maybe grabbing onto your clothes and pulling them. These are all attention-seeking behaviors because the dog is trying to get you to pay attention to them. Now, how you're going to address a majority of attention-seeking behaviors is you're going to essentially ignore it. You're not going to feed into it, but you're also going to reward them for nice behaviors. That way, we can teach them that this behavior that they have found that has gotten them attention in the past is no longer going to get them attention, and how they're going to get our attention is if they offer us one of these nice behaviors. Now, with problem behaviors, they're a little bit different because these are behaviors that the dog would naturally do even if you weren't there. So rather than trying to break that behavior, we're trying to condition healthy behaviors, right? So, not to mention, problem behaviors, unlike attention seeking behaviors, problem behaviors 9 times out of 10 are due to boredom, lack of stimulation, or too much freedom within the home. So let's go ahead and get started. And the very first one that we're going to talk about is nipping. So, nipping, I would classify as a problem behavior because it's a very, very natural thing that the dog is doing. When dogs nip or when they scratch at you or anything like that, they're trying to initiate play. And the dog is using all of the natural tools that he has to do so. Obviously, they don't speak English, so they can't say, "Hey, you want to go play?" or "You want to do fetch? Can we go for a walk?" They can't ask you to do any of those things. So instead, they're trying to get your attention in other ways. One of the ways that puppies initiate play is nipping. Um, However, when I'm working with a dog that's nipping, I break it right from the beginning, first time, every time. And the way that I break nipping is a little bit different than some other trainers, but I do it in the most natural way possible, which is teaching them bite inhibition. So, bite inhibition is something that every single dog needs to be taught no matter what. And the earlier that you address it, the better off you're going to be, especially if you live in a home with children or maybe older adults who have thinner skin that bleed really easily, or really anybody else that like could easily be hurt by a dog. Because dogs, unlike people, they grow very fast. So if you have a large breed dog, by the time it's a year old, nipping and stuff like that should not even be on that dog's radar. If you still have a dog that's being mouthy with you over a year old, then that's an issue, because it's going to be a lot harder to break at that point. That's why I break it the first time every time. And how I go about nipping is I do it the same way a litter mate or a mother dog or even just another dog in general would correct that dog. And I teach them that at no point ever should a human's hand or body or flesh or anything for that matter be in that dog's mouth. Because if you don't do that, right from the beginning, you're going to have problems, especially if you have any sort of dog with herding tendencies, because nipping is a very natural thing for them to get animals and livestock or whatever else it is that they're herding to go where they want it to go. They nip at their heels and do that sort of thing. So, it's the same thing for shepherds if they're around, a bunch of kids and they're protective of those kids. What are they going to start doing? They're going to try to start hurting them, especially if they feel like those kids might be getting towards danger. So, it's very important to teach your dog that never at any time should a human's body part be in their mouth. So, how I address nipping is that I wait for the dog because inevitably they're going to do it. Every single dog that nips is going to do it. At some point or another, they are going to put your hands in their mouth. At that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch the soft tissue directly under their tongue and in between their jawbone. And you don't have to pinch super hard, you just have to pinch hard enough for it to hurt them. And what it does is it essentially gives you the ability to bite the dog back, right? The same way that a litter mate would, the same way that their mom would, the same way that just any other dog in general would. It's going to teach them that bite inhibition. It's going to teach them, like, oh man, I bit them too hard. I need to bite lighter. Then, anytime my dog does anything to my hand besides bite it, I'm going to reward him for that. So, whether he comes up and just nudges it or he licks it or whatever, I'm going to reward him for doing those things because now he's choosing a better way to try to initiate play with me and a better way to try and get my attention. So I'm not just going to correct that nipping behavior. I'm going to reward him for choosing another behavior that still gets him the same outcome without ever having to put a human's flesh in their mouth. I've heard a lot of pushback about that. There's a lot of very like positive only trainers that address nipping the same way that they would address chewing. Um, However, I don't think that that's a good idea, and I'm going to tell you why. And it's because chewing is not an attention seeking behavior, it is not an attempt to initiate play. Chewing is a very natural behavior that dogs would do whether you were around or not. So, teaching a dog that like chewing on you isn't an option if there's something else around is not the right way to go about it. You need to teach a dog that chewing on you is not an option no matter what. And then you can go and teach them healthy chewing behaviors on top of that. So what I mean by healthy chewy behaviors is all dogs need to chew no matter what. Puppies need to chew because their teeth are coming out. It's very painful for them. They're teething. Chewing on stuff is going to help naturally get those teeth out of their bodies. It's going to soothe their gums. And then chewing on harder objects as their new teeth come in is what's actually going to help those teeth compact into the jaw itself and prevent a lot of other dental issues down the road. It's also the best way to keep your dogs busy during the day while you're gone, and it's also the best way to keep your dog's teeth clean. If you look at my dog's teeth, you would never be able to tell that my dog is 9 years old by his teeth because chewing is something that I've always encouraged and I've always um, made available for them so that they have those healthy outlets. So, problem chewing is stuff such as, chewing on the walls or the baseboards or your couches or whatever the heck else. More times than not, it's going to be harder materials, whether it be like wood or drywall or something like that. And again, it's like I said, because the puppies are teething. So they need something that's hard enough to help them get those teeth out while also impacting their new teeth into their jaws. A common mistake that a lot of people make is that they just correct that chewing behavior by reprimanding the dog for chewing without ever actually giving them a safe and healthy outlet to chew on. So, the first way that you're going to address problem chewing is by not only telling them no for chewing on whatever the heck it is that they're chewing on, but then you also need to give them something else that you do want them to chew on. Some really good options for puppies are things like raw meaty bones, Kongs that you've filled with different stuff, any sort of like hard bone, stuff like that, hard plastic bones, things of those nature. Things that I do not recommend you giving your puppy to chew on, especially if you're having issues with your puppy chewing in the house. Do not give your puppy things that resemble household items. What I mean by that is if you have a puppy who, you know, tore up his bed or his pillow or maybe one of your couch pillows or one of something like that, but all of his toys are stuffed animals, you're making it very, very hard for that dog to understand what is a dog item and what is a person item. You know, it's the same thing as the people who get mad that their dog eats their socks, but then gives them a sock monkey as a toy. Dogs are not people. You can't explain to them what's okay and what's not. You have to show them. So if their toys are exactly the same as the things that they're not supposed to be chewing on, you're setting yourself and your dog up for failure. So at least at a young age like that, until the dog has learned the difference between what's okay and what's not, make their toys and their chew bones and stuff like that drastically different from the items in your house. That way, there is no confusion. They're not thinking like, "Oh, I can chew on this thing of socks instead of my sock monkey because they're the exact same thing and this one smells like dad," right? You want to try to set your dog up for success as much as possible so that you can reward them more frequently for chewing on the things that they should be chewing on instead of just reprimanding them for the things that they shouldn't be chewing on. Um, then from there, keeping your dog supervised or locked up is going to be the easiest way to teach your dog from getting destructive or from breaking a bad chewing habit. That's why from the very first day that you bring your puppy home, you should be crate training your dog. I would say at least for the first, at, at minimum, the first 3 months that you own that dog, if that dog is not in your sight or in your care or you have to leave for any reason, that dog should be crated. Um, because it makes a safe environment for them. It's teaching them that the crate is not a bad thing. It gives you peace of mind. It makes it so you don't have to come home to a disrupted, like a torn up house. And having a crate gives you a tool for many, many, many other environments. Um, so that's going to be the first step. Well, no, the first step is giving your dog healthy outlets to chew that do not resemble household items that you don't want them to chew. The second item is controlling the environment. The third thing is if those two things are not enough to start developing those healthy chewing habits, then you can start adding in deterrents around the house. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. There's all sorts of like different bitter sprays. I've seen some people use like spray bottles and whatever, whatever. All of these different things are going to work. They're going to help deter your dog from chewing on the things that you don't want them to chew on. However, you still need to couple in like that toy or like exchange in there, um, because otherwise you're not giving your dog a healthy outlet to do instead. You're just telling them that they can't do something that's very, very natural and very, very healthy for them. So, um, sorry, she's like slowly trying to push me off the couch. Um, So, the next one that we'll go into, since it kind of plays right off of that one, is crate training. If you haven't taken the time to properly crate train your dog, you're doing yourself and them a huge injustice. Crate training is the number one way to prevent more problem behaviors from forming, to give yourself peace of mind when you're not home, to give your dog a safe environment to be in when you're not around, and also it's just a good skill to have, generally speaking. If you make that crate a negative experience for your dog, absolutely, that crate is going to seem like torture. But I promise you, if you take the time to do it right and you make that kennel a safe space for your dog, they are not going to go throw a fit about being in there. They're not going to be mad about being in there. However, it is your responsibility as the owner to do it correctly. what I mean by this is it has to be a positive experience from the very beginning. If your idea of crate training a dog is waiting until they do something wrong and then throwing them in there, locking the door, and then ignoring them, you are wrong, not the dog. You should not be using the crate as a punishment. Um, the crate is a safety tool more than anything else. It's not a punishment. It's not like, oh, you were bad, get in the crate. No. It's like um putting your kid in daycare, essentially, you know? That's what a crate is. You can think of it as like supervision when you're not home to keep your puppy safe. If you wouldn't let a toddler run around your house free when you're not home during the day, don't let a puppy. Because I promise you, puppies are going to get into just as much, if not more, trouble. And the last thing you want to do is come home to a destroyed house or a dead dog. So, crate training is especially important for puppies. Um, so if your dog has already built a negative association with the crate, it's going to be a little bit harder to go back and recondition that, but it's not impossible. And you'll be shocked what you can get a dog to do with the right kind of treats, you know? So it's all about forming that positive association right from the very beginning. So what I do with dogs, especially young puppies, is I'll bring them home and I'll put their crate directly next to my bed. What this does is if they wake up in the middle of the night and they start whining or crying or whatever, which is very natural, okay? A lot of people bring their puppies home. The second that it whines or cries or something like that, they panic, they pull it out of the crate, right? Let the dog whine a little bit, okay? You have to remember that when you first take a puppy away from its litter mates, this is the first time that the puppy has been without however many other bodies to cuddle with at night. At the very least, it's losing its mother, and then it's losing all of its litter mates on top of that. So absolutely, there is going to be a transition period when you first bring that puppy home where it's uncomfortable and it might not necessarily feel safe being in that kennel by itself. But again, that's your job as an owner to teach it that security. So what I'll do is I'll start out with the kennel by my bed or whatever. That way, if the puppy's a little nervous or whatever, I can hang my hand down over the bed. Sorry. And that way the dog can sniff my hand while it's in the crate, whatever. I can kind of reassure it a little bit. And I'm just making that a comfortable place for that puppy. But what I'm not going to do is immediately pull him out and coddle him because all that I'm teaching him is that if he starts throwing a fit and he starts whining and crying, that mommy's automatically going to rescue him. And I don't want that. I want my dog to learn coping mechanisms so that he is okay on his own and he is okay for me to leave. Um, Freaking out and pulling your dog out of the crate like that is also going to be what initially starts a lot of separation anxiety. If you never teach your dog that they are okay alone, they're never going to be okay alone, and you're going to have a lot of issues. That's another reason why crate training is so vital, is because you're teaching that dog that it is okay to be alone, and that even when they get put in that kennel, you're going to come home, and that there's no reason for them to freak out and get destructive. Um, Additionally, you don't have to do all the crate training all at once, right? A lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to get this puppy and then automatically put it in the kennel for 8 hours a day. Well, why? Why wouldn't you get a puppy, maybe take a few days off work and build it up to it? The first day, just leave it in there for an hour. The next day, a few hours. The next day, a few more hours. And then you finally go for that whole work day. You work your puppy up to it so that it's not such a shocking experience for them. Again, that's your responsibility as an owner. So, if you take the time to do crate training properly, there's about 1,000 good reasons to crate train your puppy, and there's one reason to not crate train your puppy, and that's because people think it's cruel. Um, I crate train every single dog that has ever come into my house. I crate trained all of my dogs. They all love me unconditionally. It has never made them love me less. And the only thing that it did was make my dogs safe when I wasn't around. So If you're concerned that your dog is gonna like hate you or think it's cruel or something like that, they are not. The only way that they're going to think that you are cruel is if you are cruel to them while they are in the kennel. So while they're in there, you shouldn't be yelling at them. You shouldn't get mad and slap the kennel. You shouldn't, force them in there. You shouldn't throw them in there and lock the door. Don't use it as a punishment. That crate should be their safe space, their haven, and a tool for you to use to ensure that your dog isn't getting into anything dangerous or creating problem behaviors that you're going to have to fix later while you're not at home. So, while crate training can be tricky and a little bit frustrating, do it. And if you need help or if you already have a negative association that has been built with that crate and you need help, please just let me know and I'd be happy to walk you through how to rebuild that association positively with it. I'm not going to go into that in full detail right now just because it really depends on the dog and the circumstance and everything like that as to how I would approach it. But like I said, if you need help, please let me know. Next, what we will do is pottying in the house. Potty training, if you do it right, is very, very simple. One thing that you have to remember about puppies is just like babies, they haven't fully learned how to control their bladder or their sphincters. So while they are at a huge advantage to babies, like they have more control than a baby does, they still don't have total. And when in doubt, when you are thinking about how long a puppy should be able to hold its bladder or its poop or anything like that, take the age they are in months, add one, and that's the number of hours that you should be able to leave them alone and not have them have an accident on average. Is it going to be the same thing for every puppy? Absolutely not. Oftentimes, smaller breed puppies have smaller bladders and they have to go to the bathroom more frequently than a larger breed dog. So, a good rule of thumb when you're trying to train or when you're trying to potty train a puppy is that anytime the puppy wakes up from a nap, anytime it drinks water, anytime it eats food, anytime there's any substantial change in whatever activity that your puppy is doing, take them outside. Because even if you take them outside and they just drizzle pee just a little bit, that still gives you the opportunity to reward them for going to the bathroom outside. However, if you miss that opportunity and they go to the bathroom in the house, now you're taking a step backwards. Because now, rather than just being able to reward them for going to the bathroom where you wanted them to go, now you have to deal with the fact that they just pottied in the house and if you didn't catch them in the act of it, reprimanding them later isn't going to help. The only thing it's going to do is make them not want to go to the bathroom in front of you, which is going to make them more likely to go off and hide in corners, under couches, stuff like that, to get away from you so that they can go to the bathroom without getting spanked. Because when you spank a dog after the fact, they don't, or not even just spank a dog, but anytime you reprimand a dog in any facet, whether it be yelling or whatever, the only thing that you're doing is teaching them that they are going to get reprimanded for pottying in front of you because that's what they're associating now. They're not associating it with the act of pottying in the house because you missed that opportunity. So, if you catch your dog pottying in the house after the fact, do not take their nose and shove it down in it and say, no, 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 and then do nothing else, right? You're not going to get anything out of that scenario. Clean it up, pay better attention, and then if you catch your dog in the act again at a later point, say no, pick them up, take them outside, let them finish pottying, and then reward them for pottying outside. So again, you can't just reprimand a dog without teaching them what you want. Otherwise, you're going to get an adverse effect. If you reprimand that dog and then don't reward them for doing what you want them to do, they're just going to start trying to hide from you and peeing and pooping in places that you can't see them out of fear of getting reprimanded for going to the bathroom. So, again, when you're potty training, take them out, way more than what you think is necessary. Anytime they get up from a nap, if they drink, if they eat, if they are playing and then they stop, any of those things, any substantial change in your young puppy's behavior warrants a reason for them to go outside. Um, and the more times that you can reward them for pottying outside in the very beginning, all the more easier it's going to make, because now, as you know, probably after the fifth or sixth time of you saying, okay, you want to go outside, they're going to automatically start running towards the door to go potty, making your life easier. And then it just keeps going and going and going from there. So the most basic rules of potty training: keep it on a schedule. The more schedulized that you can keep your dog, the better it's going to be, especially for potty training purposes, because then it allows you to control when they eat, when they drink, when they stop getting water for the night, all of these different things, so that you can help potty train your dog around your schedule. Second thing is that you can never reward them too many times for going potty outside. So the more opportunities you give them to go potty outside, the more opportunities you are going to give yourself to reward them for doing so. Rule number 3: do not reprimand them unless you catch them in the act of it, because they will not associate it with peeing in the house. They will associate it with going to the bathroom in front of you, generally speaking. So if you catch them in the act, tell them no, take them outside, and immediately reward them. If you don't catch them in the act, clean it up and go on about your day. Um, so those are the most basic rules for potty training. Something else that I want to touch on, as long as we're talking about it: please, 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 do not teach your dog how to go to the bathroom on a potty pad. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, especially with small breed dogs. And then, they'll come to me, the dog's like a year old, it's still pottying in the house and blah, 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 blah. But the only potty training that it's ever had was on potty pads in the house. How do you expect a dog to associate going to the bathroom outside when the only thing you've ever taught that dog is to go to the bathroom inside? Um, do not use puppy pads unless you want your dog to go to the bathroom inside for the rest of its life. That's usually the catalyst that I see for dogs who are like older and still pottying in the house, is owners that either tried to use puppy pads, or maybe they had like a balcony or something on their apartment and they used one of those I don't know, pee trays, whatever you want to call them. They are very, very hard to transition outside. So instead of just teaching your dog to pee in the grass in the first place, now you are going to have to break the behavior of going to the bathroom in the house and re-potty train them going outside, which is going to be very difficult and take a lot of work on your part, especially if the dog is already a little bit older. So please, 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 please do not ever teach your dog how to go potty on potty pads inside the house unless you want them to potty in the house for the rest of their life. Um, Moving on, we'll go to barking. Now, with barking, the very, very first step that you're going to do is you're going to identify what kind of bark it is. Now, there's all sorts of different barks. Dogs bark just naturally at each other when they get excited. You have to remember, barking is a dog's only real way of like verbal communication. So you kind of have to be realistic about your expectations for barking. And that's why I'm saying it's important to identify what kind of bark it is. Now, if it's a frustration bark, like maybe the dog wants you to do something and you're ignoring it or whatever, and it just starts barking and barking and barking and barking to try to get your attention, that is a kind of barking behavior that can be broken, because that's an attention seeking behavior. That dog is only barking at you because it wants you to pay attention to you, to it, and it's frustrated that you're not. So what is it doing? It's barking at you. And again, with attention seeking behaviors, the only thing that this dog is trying to do is elicit a response from you. So every time you say stop or shut up or hey stop, like or like, quit barking, you're feeding into it and you're going to make that barking even worse. As opposed to, if my puppy starts barking at me, I'm just going to walk away. I'm going to ignore it. Or the second that he stops barking, I'm going to reward him for that. And I'm going to teach him that he doesn't have to bark at me to get my attention. As long as he's sitting there and being nice, I'm going to give him love, and because he's cute, like he doesn't need to bark at me excessively like that. So then, we move on to like natural barking. So like alert barking. This is one that always makes me laugh because like, I mean, I'm guilty of it at times too, but like you get some people where like they'll buy a guard dog type breed, like a German Shepherd or Rottweiler or Mastiffs or really anything, like any sort of working breed. And then somebody will come into their home or trespass on their territory and the dog barks and people get mad. Well, if you didn't want a dog that was going to alert bark when something trespassed on their property, you shouldn't have gotten a dog, period. Um, it's just kind of what dogs do. Dogs are very territorial, especially, yeah, no, dogs are territorial. That's what they do. And like any time that a new entity is coming into their safe space, especially their safe space where their person sleeps, they're going to alert bark. And there's a difference between teaching a dog how to shut off that bark and teaching a dog not to do it at all. Again, barking is the only way that dogs can communicate. So if a dog is alert barking because they're nervous or scared or anxious that a new person just came into their environment, and the first thing that you do is freak out and yell at them, what do you like? That's going to have a very adverse reaction on your dog. Because if they really are just excited and alert barking and you reprimand them for that, they're they're going to get concerned as to, why is she reprimanding me for alert barking her that there's somebody here? Why, like, should I be afraid of this person? Um, and it seems silly to the owner, but this is what happens with dogs, especially if you're not 100% sure why your dog is barking at the person in the first place. Um, because if it's not alert barking and it's fear barking, let's say a giant guy just walked into your house and he's, 6'5" and he's wearing a hoodie, and your dog has never been exposed to something like that before, and they're nervous and they're fear barking at that person, and you turn around and reprimand them for being fearful, well, they're only going to get more fearful, because here they are, they're using their only means of communication to tell you that they're afraid of this person, and you just reprimanded them for it. So now they've learned that what they would naturally use, aka barking or, trying to retreat or whatever, to tell you that they're nervous about this new person in their house, you reprimanded them for it, and now they have to take it up a notch because they're not any less scared than they were before. They might even be more scared, but now they feel like being vocal isn't an option, so they're going to start stepping it up. This is how you see a lot of the progression of like fear reactivity, where dogs will just progressively get more and more aggressive because their fear was like somebody tried to extinguish their fear response, and all it did was heighten it. So then the next type of barking would obviously be more like an aggressive barking or something like that. Um, I will say, in all the dogs that I work with, I think I've only ever worked with 2 dogs that I would classify as, like, an aggressive dog. Um, you can tell the difference very, very quickly. A lot of people think their dogs are aggressive and not. It's just like a fear reactivity or an excitement reactivity. Um, the chances of your dog just being aggressive right out the gate, especially if you had it as a puppy, the chances of it just being inherently aggressive is very, very slim. Generally speaking, when you see like those attack dogs and stuff like that, or any of those dogs that you would classify as an aggressive dog, that was bred into them. And whoever was trying to get them to do whatever it was they wanted them to do, they fed into those aggressive behaviors. Um, for example, if you have we'll use a German Shepherd because they're a pretty common dog. If you take a German Shepherd who has a really high prey drive, really high work drive, and is just overall a pretty intense dog, and then you just keep feeding into that intensity and you do bite work with it and you do that sort of work with it, you are building onto those already aggressive tendencies and you're making them more and more aggressive. Um, the same thing, like if you have a really high drive dog, um, and you train them wrong, like you try to just like reprimand them for that drive and all that stuff instead of finding a conducive outlet for it, that's where you're going to see aggression start building. The same way with like fear aggression. If your dog reacts fearfully and you try to force them into that situation or you try to reprimand them for being fearful, they're going to get more aggressive because what they've tried to do didn't work. Now they're escalating. So, again, very, very rarely are dog barks actually true aggression. Um, that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And then the last kind of barking that I want to talk about is the people who say my dog barks at all the little animals in my backyard and this, that, the other, and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, their dog is like a German short hair pointer. Now, German short hair point, well, not even just them, any sort of dog that was bred to work and has a high prey drive is going to get excited and bark and stuff like that at animals, at people walking by, at all that stuff because they are being sensitive to the movement of those things. If a squirrel was just sitting perfectly still on your fence post, odds are the dog isn't going to bark at it. As soon as it starts moving, that's when the dog gets crazy, right? And it's all about their reaction to those stimulus and whether or not you can shut it off. Now, dogs barking at squirrels and stuff like that, it's very, very natural. The odds of you ever being able to completely extinguish that behavior, very low, nor should you want to. That's a natural behavior. That's like trying to teach a human not to laugh at something that's funny. Um, that's insane. What is important is whether or not you can get your dog to disengage and listen to you when it's important. Can you shut that behavior off or not? That's what you should be focusing on. It's not about whether or not they bark, it's about whether or not you can regain control once they start barking. That's what I want you to remember whenever you're working with a dog who barks a lot. Um, so again, you're gonna identify what kind of bark it is, whether it's an attention seeking or just like a regular one. Um, and then you're gonna see like when does it happen, and then are you able to shut it off or not. Yeah, so those are some good stuff with barking. If you have one of those dogs that sits in the kennel and just barks all day, every day, um, either A, it's not getting enough mental stimulation while it's in the crate itself, or B, it has already developed a bad relationship with that crate and you've never taken the time to properly crate train that dog. Um, if you have gone through all of those steps, and you're giving your dog something high value in their crate every single day, and like you've already gone through all the proper things to try to make your dog comfortable in that crate while you're home during the day, then what I would recommend is using some sort of ultrasonic um, bark corrector. Obviously, I'm not naive. I know that there are situations where you can't just leave your dog sitting in the kennel barking all day. Um, Apartment complexes aren't going to allow for it. You're going to end up getting evicted if you just let that happen. So, if you've already tried all the other modalities and you still have a dog that just sits and barks all day every day, I would highly recommend one of the ultrasonic bark collars. Um, because like I said, it teaches the dog to shut the bark off naturally because while they're barking, it triggers a noise similar to like what a dog whistle would be. It's very, very high pitched, so humans can't hear it, but it's aggravating to the dog. So while they're barking, that a noise starts going, and then as soon as they stop barking, that noise shuts off. So they learn that they can shut that annoying noise off by being quiet. Um, It's the same sort of idea as other bark collars, except for I can say that I've always had just as much success with one of those noise emitting collars as I've had with like an actual like shock bark collar. Very, very rarely are dogs stubborn enough that they will just sit and listen to that obnoxious noise so that they can keep barking. Most of them find it very, very unpleasant. So those are some ways to address just consistent problem barking, if you've already tried everything else to make the dog comfortable while you leave. Um, so since we had already kind of talked about reactivity a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and touch on reactivity again because reactivity and a dog's ability to control their reactions around stimulus is without a doubt the number one issue that I see as a trainer. Um, and a lot of people misconstrue the reactions that their dogs are giving, making them react in a way that they shouldn't, which is unintentionally making some of these problems worse. So, when I talk about reactivity, I mean like dogs that just kind of lose their brains a little bit. You see it most commonly, like when you're on a walk, your dog's at the end of their leash and they're just barking and barking and barking and going crazy, and you can't get them to disengage or whatever. And they seem really aggressive on their leash, right? I have a lot of people say that to me. They're like, Jordan, I can't walk him anywhere because he goes crazy and he barks and he growls, but he's not a mean dog. I swear, he's not a mean. You're probably right. He probably isn't a mean dog. He's probably being fear reactive. Um, and there's a couple different ways that you can kind of go about diagnosing where your dog's reactivity is coming from. So, if you have a dog who never has issues off the leash, like he just gets really excited and he will play with any other dog and he's really friendly around other people and stuff like that, and he acts like that when he's on a leash as well, that means that you probably just have a hyperactive dog that needs to learn how to control himself around new stimulus. It's most likely not any sort of aggression at all. It's just overstimulation and lack of experience on the handler's part to be able to teach that dog how to control that stimulus. If you have a dog that, anytime it meets a new dog, it rolls on its belly or it kind of tucks its tail and tries to run away, is a little bit nervous around new people, odds are that reactivity is coming out of fear. Because at one point or another in that dog's life, it was fearful, tried to escape, and couldn't. So now it has learned that what it would normally do isn't going to get it away from that fearful situation. When dogs are on leashes, they automatically when dogs are on leashes, they automatically get more reactive because they can no longer retreat. So if they're nervous or scared or something like that, they're stuck. They can't get away, which is going to make them more reactive out of fear because they feel like they're now cornered and they can't get out of that situation. So, as an owner, if you react negatively to fear reactivity, all you're doing is feeding into that fear, and you're actually going to continue to make them more reactive. When in reality, what you need to do is just help them get more confident and help them learn that even when they're on a leash, when they're with you, they are safe. Um, so fear reactivity can be kind of hard to deal with. It can be really hard to manage. So if you are having fear reactivity, I would highly recommend working with a professional trainer just so that you don't unintentionally make it worse. In my opinion, fear reactivity is worse than actual like aggressive tendencies because aggression is predictable. If you just have an aggressive dog, an as silly as this sounds, aggressive dogs are easy to work with if you know that the dog is aggressive going into it, because there's a lot of things that you're going to avoid. If I know for a fact that a dog is really aggressive, at no point am I going to try to make direct eye contact with it because then I'm challenging the dog. However, with a fear reactive dog, um, if you look directly into their eyes, they're going to get fearful and start barking at you, but they'll probably try to retreat. So it's just kind of different amongst different dogs, right? But With a fear reactive dog, the problem is you don't know exactly what it is that's triggering that fear. You don't know the extent of that fear, and you have to be very careful because, like I said, you can make it even worse. So, if you have a dog that you think might be reacting fearfully, I would highly recommend working with a trainer who has experience in that and can help you. Um, yeah, so those are like the two major types of reactivity. I'm not going to insult you guys. Odds are, if you have an aggressive dog, you know it. Um, like aggressive dogs are going to be the ones where they're like, "Hey, huge red flag. Don't let this dog around." Hey, huge red flag. Don't let this dog around other dogs or kids or people or cats or whatever the case may be. They're usually going to give you a pretty good heads up about it prior. Um, because yeah. Um, that brings me into my next thing. If you are not an experienced dog handler, please be realistic about the kind of dogs that you bring home and bring into your home, and be realistic about the types of behaviors and problems that you are and are not going to be capable of fixing. If you bring home a dog and it is super aggressive or too reactive or something like that, and you know that you don't have the ability to help that dog, maybe just don't bring it home. Because aggression, like if you just ignore an aggressive dog, they're just going to get more aggressive. If you, especially if it's a working breed, like probably partially the reason why they got aggressive in the first place is because they had such a high drive and nobody did anything with it. And then they unintentionally um, fueled the bad traits. So please, be realistic about issues that you can and can't handle on your own. And if you think a dog is going to be way outside of your skill level or ability level, or if you just, are smart enough to know that you're not going to have the time to dedicate to that dog to help him through that stuff, maybe just don't get it. Um, Another one, okay, so now we'll go right from there, right into stimulus control because they kind of feed off of one another. Um, Whenever I talk about stimulus control, whenever I'm approaching stimulus control, whenever I'm working with it, there's two things that I always like to keep in mind. One, the calmer I am, the calmer they're going to be. If you and your dog are walking and you see somebody coming from down the street and okay, my dog always goes crazy when he sees other people, he's probably going to start getting crazy, blah blah blah, and then you immediately start getting nervous, maybe choking up on the leash, maybe even your heart rate goes up or something like that. Your dog feels all of that. Okay. Like dogs are so receptive to your body movements and your mannerisms and all that energy that you're sending down the leash. Your dog is picking up on that before you ever even know it. So that's the very first step is you need to be in control of yourself, your emotions, and how you're responding to the dog. How you respond should not fluctuate based off of how the dog responds. That's a very key part of this training. Because once you lose a grip, it's game over. Because they are looking to you to be that solid thing, that thing that they can depend on no matter what. So if you're losing your brains, they're definitely going to lose their brains. So step two is that you should always try to interrupt your dog before they have completely lost their mind. If you pay attention to a dog's body language, they will tell you exactly when they're about to go crazy. A lot of times their ears will perk up, maybe their tail will start wagging. If it's more like a more aggressive dog, maybe their hackles will start go up, they'll start making noises, maybe their speed will pick up a little bit faster, all of a sudden they start walking like a show dog. If you see any of those things, it's pretty obvious that your dog is starting to get elevated. Um, and when dogs start to get elevated, I like to compare it to a temper tantrum that a toddler would throw, right? If you can keep that toddler from getting to the point that it goes way over threshold, your life is going to be a lot better. But again, sometimes a toddler will start throwing a tantrum. We get like mad or annoyed or upset. And what does it do? It feeds into the tantrum. It's the same thing with dogs. If you see a dog start getting stimulated and you can disengage the dog from whatever it is that's stimulating it before it passes over that threshold, you're going to be much more successful than if you wait for that dog to completely lose its brains and then try to ask it to come back down. Another way that I like to describe this is with like a panic attack in a person, okay? Especially if you have a dog that's really fearful, that's essentially what's happening to them is that dog is about to have a panic attack because he's afraid and your response is yelling at him. This is essentially the same as if you had somebody who was in a full scale panic attack and you're just yelling at them, hey, lay down, stop having a panic attack, stop it, stop it. Do you think that's ever going to help? That's never going to make somebody stop having a panic attack. What's going to help somebody stop having a panic attack is by you remaining calm, helping them ground themselves, aka come back in touch with reality, right? So, and then helping them control that physical response that they're having. Okay, you have to teach somebody how to control that physical response. It's the whole reason therapists have a job. um, and with dog training, it's the exact same thing. We're trying to teach them how to control their responses to that stimulus so that they don't go completely over threshold. So if I have a dog that's starting to go over threshold, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to yank, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to get him to re-engage with me and reward him for doing so. Then I'm going to keep going. And as long as I can still get him to keep engaging with me and remaining under control and stuff like that, I'm going to keep going. The key is you don't want your dog to not be interested in stuff. I see that a lot. Um, Actually, I'll tell you three mistakes I see trainers making super often with dogs that make their reactivity worse. First is trying to kill uh, that interest altogether. Um, you see some trainers, especially a lot of trainers that use shock collars and stuff like that. If that dog even looks at something that they don't want them to, they're going to shock them. Or if the dog is too excited or whatever, they'll shock them. And what this does is it's trying to kill a natural response to something. It's teaching your dog that you don't want them to be interested in stuff. You don't want them to like new things. You don't want them to like new people, and that's going to create issues. We want our dogs to be interested. We want our dogs to be friendly. We want our dogs to be curious, but we need them to stay under control and responsive to us while they do that. Um, Another mistake I see is people who let their dogs stay in that full-blown crazy mode, but expect them to be able to control like random behaviors, you know? So rather than trying to teach them how to control that stimulus the entire way, or rather than trying to teach them how to control their reactions, what people will do is just let them be bouncing off the walls and then be like, sit, sit, sit. And then as long as the dog sits down, they think that they have now controlled that stimulus. No, the dog's still going crazy. And the second that that new person goes to pet them, the dog launches himself into their face and he's going insane, right? He hasn't learned how to control that stimulus at all. What he's learned is to sit down in the middle of a panic attack. So, um, keep that in mind as well. And then the final mistake that I see is people unintentionally feeding into that excitement. Um, like I said, if you can keep a dog from going way over that threshold, the better off you're going to be. And what I see a lot of trainers do, especially like strictly positive trainers, is they get their dog so excited about stimulus. They're so afraid of creating a fear response to a stimulus that they create an overly positive response to a stimulus, which is actually kind of taking a step back. Um, because if I have my dog on the leash and he's like looking around at stuff and he starts getting fixated on something and I say, "What's that? Look at it. What is that? What is that?" Which is what a lot of positive trainers will tell you to do is to keep increasing your dog's interest in that. Now, if it's a really, really fearful puppy who hasn't been exploring at all and stuff like that, by all means, help increase that curiosity, help them build that confidence. But if you have a dog that's already way over threshold and super excited about something, and you're, "What is that? What is it? Look at it. Look at it." I mean, look at just from me saying that. He was dead asleep and he heard that and he woke up all excited. What do you think is going to happen to a dog that's already overstimulated when you start feeding into that excitement? They're going to get even more excited and that's going to make your job even harder. So we don't want to kill that reaction, but we also don't want to feed into it. We want our dogs to know that it's great to be curious. We want them to be friendly. We want them to do all of those things, but they need to stay under control while we do it. And so those are a couple mistakes that I see other trainers making super, super regularly. So I thought I'd bring it up to you guys right now. Um, Another common issue that I have is people who have large breed puppies and then they bring them into the home and maybe they have a cat or a kid or another small dog and they're concerned because my puppy isn't aggressive, but I'm afraid he's going to hurt my other animals. Um, that is where socialization with other dogs is going to come into effect. Because, as I mentioned earlier, your puppy doesn't know anything. You have to teach it everything. So, if you take a large breed puppy away from its litter mates and its mom and everything like that when it's very young, let's say, the recommended 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, that dog never had a chance to learn bite inhibition. It never learned how to properly interact with adult dogs. It never learned a lot of stuff, which is not a big deal. However, that responsibility now falls on you. And with large breed puppies, the problem is they grow so fast that they don't even know that they're big. They're just trying to play. They're trying to do all the things that they would normally do with other dogs, except now this cat's like a third of their size, or the kid, or the dog, or whatever the case may be. They're trying to play the only way that they know how, except this thing is way smaller than them. So, the very worst thing that you can do in that situation is reprimand them for trying to play. If you know for sure that your puppy is trying to play, don't reprimand them. I try to tell people all the time the only time that you should step in with a dog to dog interaction is if you know for sure that one of the other dogs is going to get injured in the process. Um, Otherwise, I let dogs figure it out on their own. Um, the problem with big puppies is not that they're incapable of learning how to play with a small dog, but it's because they have not learned that they aren't always going to be the biggest one around yet. My best recommendation to anybody who is struggling with a large breed puppy, playing too roughly with their kids, cats, dogs, whatever, is to introduce them to more large breed dogs who can teach them how to properly play with other dogs. That's what puppies need. They don't need to be taught not to play. They need to be taught how to play properly. So like for me, that's one huge advantage that I have when I bring puppies into my own home because my 3 boys are great about that, especially my dog Coda. He is so unreactive to everything. Literally, a dog could attack him and sink its teeth. I've seen this happen. A dog attacked him, sunk his teeth into Coda's neck, and Coda did not do anything. He just looked at me like, "Mom, what? Are you gonna help me?" Which I did, obviously. But my point is that Coda, he's so good about teaching other dogs how to play that that's what large breed puppies need. They need to be shown that like, okay, I can't do that because it hurts other dogs, or I can't do that because it's inappropriate. And they are only going to learn that by playing with other dogs that are bigger than them. You need to teach your large breed dog that they aren't always going to be the largest, so like they need to learn how to play accordingly to that dog's size. Um, I watch Coda, he plays with 8, 9-week-old puppies, and never hurts them, nothing like that. And they learn how to play with adult dogs right from the beginning. That's what puppies need, especially large breed puppies, especially if you're having issues with them hurting other dogs, or if you're scared that they're going to. Now, as long as we're on that note, something that is extremely important is to understand that, like, not all adult dogs are going to teach your dog how to properly play with other adult dogs, okay? So, when I say make sure that you're socializing your dog and giving them opportunities to play with other large dogs, please be smart about it. Um, because it only takes one bad interaction with the wrong dog to completely destroy your dog for the rest of its life, especially during the first year or so of that dog's life. It goes through so many different fear stages where if you have a bad enough interaction with another dog during that one of those fear stages, you could create fear of other dogs for the rest of that dog's life, and you're going to be battling it forever. So when you are trying to socialize your puppy, make sure that the adult dog that you're using is not going to overcorrect. Make sure that you're not using a semi-dog. Make sure that you're not using a dog that was never properly socialized itself to try and properly socialize your dog, if that makes sense. Um, so yes, socialization is key, but proper socialization is even more important. Make sure that you're making good decisions about the situations that you're putting your dog in so that you're constantly setting them up for success. Um, okay, so we're already about an hour into this video. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to address one more. It's a pretty easy one. It's just digging in the yard. So digging, generally speaking, is caused by one of two things, either boredom or lack of mental stimulation, and they're trying to find it themselves. Dogs have way better senses of smell than we do. They also have better senses of hearing. So, like, you might not be able to hear it, but if there's a little mole in the ground and it's like digging tunnels and stuff like that, or mice, or whatever kind of animal you might have where you live, dogs can hear that. They can also smell that. So if they're outside and they're unsupervised and they can hear little vermin digging around in your garden, or they can smell something down there, they're probably going to go for it. Um, Especially dogs with like really high scent drives, like beagles and hounds, and other things like that. Any dogs that have really high scent drives and high work drives on top of that, generally speaking, that's where you're going to see a majority of the diggers coming from. Because not only can they hear it and smell it, but they're probably not getting enough mental stimulation, so they're trying to keep themselves busy while they're out there by themselves. So, the same way that we talked about potty training earlier, the same sort of rules are going to apply to digging here. You cannot reprimand a dog for digging after the fact. Um, yeah, if you yell at them and scare them, I hear that all the time. Well, when I come home and I yell at him, he cowers. He knows. Maybe he's just cowering because you're yelling at him. Like I said earlier, it's all about tone of voice and body language. Because I can aggressively tell my dog that I love him. Oh, I love you. And if I say it mean enough, he's gonna cower a little bit, just about tone and body language. So you might think that that dog knows exactly why you're upset. I promise you it doesn't. It's just feeding off of the fact that you're really mad. You have to catch the dog in the act of digging in order for it to associate your reprimand with the act of digging. So there's lots of different ways that you can stop your dog from digging. Um, One of those ways, obviously, would be teaching it or catching it in the act, telling it no, and then giving it some sort of other activity to do. Again, you can't tell your dog that it can't do something without giving it some other sort of healthy outlet to keep itself entertained. Because 9 times out of 10, that's why it's digging in the first place. So, whether you're giving it like some frozen Kongs or like some brain games, or, if you start doing nose work exercise with it on the side. I've seen some people where their dogs were such bad diggers that rather than trying to break the habit altogether, they built them their own little area to dig in where they could, and then they just reconditioned them to only dig in there. Um, Lots of different ways you can go about it. If you want to try to break digging altogether, like I said, first step is going to be finding that dog another outlet for that energy and need for mental stimulation. The second step is going to be catching it in the act. So you can bury chicken wire in their old holes so that as they dig, it'll hit their paws. You can put a bunch of cayenne pepper in there so as they're digging, it's hot. You can put, a lot of times, you can bury a dog's own poop in its holes because dogs, if they're properly potty trained and they're not avid poop eaters, they won't dig where their poop is at. And generally speaking, they won't try to do anything where their food is at. They try to keep their poop separate. Um, so if you bury their poop back in those holes, a lot of times they won't re-dig in that same place. Plus, it will mask a lot of the other scents that they might be picking up from other animals and stuff like that under the soil. You can try burying large rocks in those holes so that as they dig, they can't get the rock back out. Um, and then, if that kind of stuff doesn't work, there's other sort of like startle responses. So, like a shaker can that just makes a loud noise and interrupts them. That can be good because then they're building like that negative association with digging and that loud noise that scared them. There's people that use beep collars like that for the same sort of thing. Um, yeah, there's a ton of different ways to break jumping, or I'm sorry, break digging. And now that we're on that topic, I guess we'll go into jumping as well, because that's probably one of my number one complaints for jumping. Um, Jumping is an attention-seeking behavior that your dog learns at a very young age, that if he jumps all over you, you will pay attention to him in one regard or another. Whether it be positive, whether it be negative, that dog doesn't care. He has figured out that jumping will get him attention. So, in order to break jumping, the very first thing that you have to teach your dog is that jumping is no longer the activity that's going to get him the attention that he wants, and that he is only going to get that attention if he gives you some sort of positive behavior. So, when I work with dogs, even from the very first time that I meet dogs, um, I have a game plan going in every single time. I always have very high value treats on me. I greet them low with my hands low. I get them interested in that treat right away. And what that does when I greet them low, it makes it so automatically they don't feel like they need to jump and get higher to be on my level. A lot of dogs, like, they want to be right there in your face, especially when they're excited. So if you greet them low, they don't feel the need to get up to you. They still feel like they're getting that attention and that like connection with you that they wanted, but you're meeting them low. This gives you the opportunity to reward them for keeping all 4 feet on the ground. Um, and it lets them know that they're still going to get the attention that they want, even if they're not jumping all over you. And you should be rewarding them heavily for every second that you're petting them and their feet are staying on the ground. From there, once I start to build that association that they can get attention from me without jumping on me, I'm going to reward them every single time they do anything other than jump on me for at least that first immediate period. So as I'm walking around the house, anytime if they walk up to me and they don't jump, I'll reward them. If they choose to sit down, I'll definitely reward them. Um, like I said, anytime they offer me a behavior besides jumping on me in the beginning, that's when I'm going to reward them. And then from there, you can get a little bit more strict with it. Like, okay, maybe I'm only going to reward my dog if he sits first, or I'm only going to reward him if he sits and stays there for at least 2 seconds, and you can kind of start compounding on it, but you have to start somewhere. And so that's where I start. I will make sure that I greet them low, whatever, whatever. After you greet a dog, especially if you're dealing with jumping, like when people come into your house or whatever, have them greet them low, reward them for staying low, and then ignore them until the dog has time to relax. Because 9 times out of 10, it's just overstimulation. And so the less excited the dog gets initially, the faster it's going to calm down, and the faster that person will be able to give the dog more attention without it jumping all over it and going crazy. So greet them low, say hi, whatever, whatever, ignore them until they calm down, then give them more attention. So, excuse me. So 9 times, sorry guys. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to know when there's somebody coming over to your house. Have treats ready. Let the person know, like, hey, I'm trying to teach my dog not to jump, whatever, whatever. Before you get here, like, grab a treat from the bowl outside, meet the dog low, whatever, whatever. It's your home. You can ask people to do whatever you want when coming into your home, especially if it has to do with the safety and behavior of your dog. That dog is a part of your family. Those people coming into your home may or may not be, but if those people aren't willing to help you and, like, work with you and try to make your dog a better part of your family, maybe they shouldn't be coming to your house anyway, especially if it's something really easy like that. So be prepared for it before people come over. Another thing that you can do, especially if you know, like, you might be having guests with, like, small children or elderly or something like that, where, like, that initial option might not be an option, is to put a leash on the dog an hour or two prior to those people coming over and just letting it drag around the house. The same idea as what you would do with, like, a shock collar so that they forget it's there. You're just going to put that leash on and let them forget. Then when those people come over, you're going to stand on the leash as it's laying on the ground. That way, when the dog goes to launch up, it can't. It gets stuck on the ground. It's not going to hurt the dog. They'll figure out pretty quick. And from there, you can then have the people still greet the dog low, reward him for staying on the ground. He's not thinking about it because he's not thinking that the reason why he can't jump is because you're standing on the leash. The only thing he's associating right there is that he's not jumping and he's still getting love and attention from the people coming in the door. So those are the two best ways that I've learned to address jumping for excitability when coming in the house. Now, I think since we're about an hour and 15 minutes into this video, I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. We covered a pretty broad amount of topics here. So if you have any questions about any of them, or you would like some more clarification or some more details or anything like that, please feel free to drop them below or send me a message directly, and I'll be happy to help you the best that I can. Otherwise, I hope that you got something helpful out of this video. I hope that you tune in to the next one. And if you want to check out my other videos, please feel free. They're all free. And I think you might be able to get some good stuff out of them. So anyways, thank you for coming to Trainer Chats, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later.